Hello, third grade. So we're going to continue our chapter 4 social studies, which was communities and how they change over time. And we're going to continue with lesson 4 with how can people and events change communities. And in this lesson, you're going to be learning about different ways people and events can change a community over time. You're going to be using the information to understand how they changed it and what they did to make their community better and how they affected their community. And then you're going to be writing a letter at the end of it to one of the people you read about in this lesson to explain how they changed your community or our country as a community together. And we can see here the images that they're showing you are cell phones and how they looked in the beginning versus now. These ones are probably the ones that you're more used to, and this is how we're used to seeing them now, but these are how they used to look back in the day. And depending on what year, they had different designs. So these are not even the oldest cell phones because the oldest ones were about 5 pounds and something. These are actually the mobile ones that didn't have to be connected to anything. And you can look at the photos and see what the differences are between them and why do you think that they look different from before to now. And if you think that phones now have anything in common with the phones before. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we analyze the source, which means that we're going to be annotating our text, and we have to make sure that we're answering all of these inspect prompts. So first we're going to read the title and the primary source. Then you're going to be thinking about what this text could be about. So you're going to be guessing what you think the text is going to be talking about or trying to tell you. You can write your guess down here underneath where it says my notes. Make sure that you circle words that you don't know, and you can underline clues that will help you answer these questions. So one of the questions is, who is Martin Cooper? How did he change the way people live and do business? Why were New Yorkers surprised to see what Martin Cooper was doing? So these are 3 questions that you should be trying to answer, and you should be trying to underline based on the reading. Then, after we're done with that part, you're going to be answering these questions. So you're going to be interpreting the graph right here. This is a graph. It's going to be giving you information. This is a zoomed in version of it, talking about cell phone usage over time. And you can see that the number was very low in the beginning, and then it starts going to the millions, then the hundreds of millions. And the latest year was 2016 when this information was collected. So it might be more now. You're going to be underlining the dates and events in the text above. All right. Write the dates in the correct places on the graph. So you're going to be using the information here to write the dates inside your textbook or your workbook, and you're going to be following along with it while we read through it. And then think of some reasons why cell phones changed so much between 1986 and 1996. And then what problems do you think cell phones have solved? Or what problems do you think they've created? Some people think cell phones are more dangerous than beneficial. Some people think that they are more helpful than harmful. So you can write down all of your information over here in the notes and make sure that you annotate your answers. And then we can get started. Making communication mobile. Primary source, in their words, Martin Cooper. As I walked down the street while talking on the phone, New Yorkers gaped at the sight of someone actually moving around while making a phone call. Martin Cooper in 2011. So you can see here, he has a cell phone in his hand, but it looks nothing like the phones that we're used to seeing now. And it says here for the caption of the photo, Martin Cooper, inventor of the first truly mobile phone. To make a telephone call in the mid-20th century, you had to go where the phone was, in your home, in the school, office, or in a phone booth. Phones were connected to the phone system by a telephone wire. If you moved to another city, you needed to get a new phone number. Martin Cooper changed this forever. He and a team of engineers designed the first mobile phone a person could carry anywhere. Cooper made the first cell phone call in 1973. However, it took 10 years before people could actually buy a cell phone. The early mobile phones were big and heavy, but technology has improved them. Today, smartphones fit into a pocket. It can do many things. It is a camera, calendar, calculator, and notepad. You can text, email, play games, or surf the web on your phone. The graph below shows the number of people who own cell phones over a period of 30 years. So make sure that you answer and you annotate based on these questions. So you've already answered the question, who is Martin Cooper? You can already answer, how did he change the way people live and do business? Because you already know what he did. And you can talk about how his invention, creating a really mobile phone, which means that it can move, could help businesses. And why do you think New Yorkers were surprised to see what he was doing with his mobile phone? And it says here on the bottom, or at least in the primary source, that they were surprised when they saw him walking around and making a phone call. He didn't have to stay in one place. And then you're going to be drawing a straight line on the graph. So make sure you annotate your graph using a pencil, where you're going to be making a dot from 1986 to the dot at 2016. And what do you think about the line between 1986 and 2018? So here's 1986, here's 2018 or 2016, and you're going to be comparing what is the difference between these 2 points. Are they the same amount or are they different amounts? Why do you think they're different amounts? Make sure that you underline the dates and you write the dates in the correct place on the graph. So there was 1973 was one of the dates. And you can see if there are any other dates mentioned inside there. And then once you're done with that, we'll go to the next page. Now that you've finished annotating your first 2 pages, we're going to get started on the Explore Problem and Solution graphic organizer. And a problem is a situation that, if solved, will improve. A solution is a way to solve a problem. So you've done it with math, you've done it with science, where we have different situations and we're trying to get a certain thing done. And that's a problem in this case. A problem before could be that cell phones were very heavy and no one could afford them. And a solution is that Martin provided a way to make sure that everyone could actually travel with their phone and they didn't need to find a phone. And so that's one example. So you're going to read the text again, and you can figure out if there's any other problems that you notice there. And you're going to look for details. So you're going to be looking for information or sentences that say what the problems are and how they can be fixed. Because sometimes inside a text, they'll give you clues that say, oh, if we could make the car faster, or we could make the phone smaller. Those are solutions to the problem, which is that the phone is heavy or that you can only use it in certain places. And then the third thing you're going to do is find any solutions. So see if there was anything inside that text that said how the problem was fixed. So in this one, you're going to put a problem here based on the reading, which could be that if you moved to a new city, you had to have a new phone number, or if you didn't have a phone, you had to find a phone. And if you wanted to talk to someone and you didn't have a phone in your house, you had to go somewhere else to call. So that's a problem. You can choose any of the problems that we talked about over there on the other page. And then the steps to solve the problem can include the first cell phone being created, can include the cell phones not being expensive. It can include cell phones being affordable, or now they're able to actually be used without wires, so you don't have to just stay in one spot. And then they were created by who? So you already read on the previous page who created them. And then the solution is that now we have phones that we can use anywhere in the world. You can take a phone here, take it to the other side of the world, and it'll still work. You don't have to be connected to a wire. You don't have to go and find a phone, or make sure that your phone number is you can have the same phone number anywhere in the world if you want to. So these are all solutions to the problems that were on the previous page. Now we're going to get started on your textbook pages. So we have page 172 to 79 inside your textbook. And then inside there, we're going to be looking for clues and text evidence to answer the questions of problems people and communities face and solutions to those problems. And then these are the places you're going to take your notes. So here's a problem that they already gave you. African Americans were enslaved and treated unequally. We talked about this when we were talking about the civil rights and how inequality was normal in the United States before and in lots of places all over the world. And then another problem was that Thomas Edison and Helen Keller had to find ways to overcome disabilities. Helen Keller was mute, deaf, and I also believe blind. And Thomas Edison, his wife, if I recall correctly, was mute or was deaf. Then there were laws. Another problem was that laws treated African Americans unequally, and natural disasters caused destruction. So these are all problems that we're going to be looking out for inside the text. Then we're going to be looking for solutions to these problems down here. And if you see any that interest you, so if you chose the first problem, the second problem, the third problem, the fourth one, you can write down here the steps. What ways did they try to solve them? And then the last one is the solution, which was what did this happen? What caused, what was the actual fix to the problem? So we're going to be reading page 172 to 179, which is available on Google Classroom if you want to read along with it. And then once we're done, we'll fill this out and go to the next page. This is Benjamin Banneker. This is Benjamin Banneker, and we're on page 172 in your textbook, where we're talking about how people and events can change communities. Benjamin Banneker was an American scientist. He also worked to end slavery and bring equality for all African Americans. So here's an illustration of him. We just read the caption on the bottom. And now we're going to read about what he did and how he helped. People can change communities. Benjamin Banneker changed our nation's capital and how early leaders of our nation viewed the African American community. Banneker grew up seeing slavery and racial inequality all around him. Many people at the time did not think African Americans were equal with other people, but Banneker proved them wrong. He was an inventor, an astronomer, an author, a mathematician. At 15, he created an irrigation system for his family farm. Irrigation is a water pathway or a way to water your plants. So at 15 years old, he created an irrigation system for his family farm. He later made the first clock in America. He went on to write an almanac with data about astronomy and comments about society. In 1791, Banneker sent his almanac and a letter to the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, to show African Americans were equal to others. During this time, Thomas Jefferson might not have been president yet, because he eventually does become president. He told Jefferson that African Americans were not being treated equally and encouraged him to help end slavery. Jefferson later asked that Banneker be used to help plan the new capital, Washington, D.C. When the lead planner quit and took the city's plans, Benjamin Banneker saved the project by redoing all the lost plans from his memory. So this is before computers, this is before taking pictures, this is before all of that. And he was able to finish the plans and fix the situation because he could remember all of it. Let's go to the next page. So the first page was about Benjamin Banneker and how he helped design our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and how he helped create the United States or helped develop the United States. Now we're going to be talking about Thomas Edison and other important people. Thomas Edison was born in 1847. He was partially deaf, so it wasn't his wife, it was him, which made school difficult for him. Edison's mother taught him at home. While he was still in his teens, he learned to operate a telegraph machine. He began inventing devices to help him overcome his hearing difficulties. Eventually, he became a full-time inventor. He invented the phonograph that plays records, the light bulb, and more. His inventions transformed communities worldwide. So, I don't know if you know what a phonograph looks like, but if you've ever seen a record player, he helped create one of the first ones. He also helped create the light bulb. He was not the official first person to create it, but he helped develop it. And just think what life would be like if we didn't have light bulbs and if we didn't have ways that we could play sound. If you've ever seen a cassette tape, if you've ever seen how your phone can play sound, or if you've ever seen a CD or a CD player, all of those ways to play noises or to play sounds or music even come from his invention, the record player or the phonograph. In 1882, when Helen Keller was almost 2 years old, she was very sick. So on the bottom left, you can see Helen Keller sitting in a chair. The illness left her blind and deaf. Her teacher, Anne Sullivan, used finger signals developed for deaf people. She spelled words into the palm of Helen Keller's hand. Helen learned to connect the signals to the things around her. She learned to read Braille, a writing system for blind people that uses letters made of raised dots. Eventually, Keller even learned to speak aloud. She went to college. Keller then became a writer, speaker, and leader for people with vision and hearing disabilities. Her life story and work showed that everyone should be treated as valuable members of our communities. Now we're on the next page, so 175, and we're talking about Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman escaped slavery by running away to Philadelphia. She was free, but she did not forget the people she left behind. She made many dangerous journeys to help enslaved people escape to freedom. She led them along a route called the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, she was a scout, nurse, and spy. After the war, she took care of orphans and elderly people. Tubman's work touched many lives and changed many communities. So the underground route called the Underground Railroad wasn't actually underground, but because it was hidden, they called it the Underground Railroad. And what it actually was a bunch of people who agreed that slavery was wrong and wanted to help people or help African Americans escape by using their houses as shelters and hiding them from slave catchers or people that were hunting them. Now we're going to read about Rosa Parks. Slavery ended almost 50 years before Rosa Parks was born in 1913. However, African Americans were still treated unfairly. So this is after Harriet Tubman helped and the Civil War and all of that. Then Rosa Parks was born. However, African Americans were still treated unfairly. In Montgomery, Alabama, where Parks lived, there were laws forcing African Americans to ride seats at the back of the bus. One day in 1955, a bus driver told Rosa Parks to give her seat to a white man. She refused. Her arrest and trial led to the very special kind of protest called a boycott. African Americans all over Montgomery, Alabama stopped riding the bus. The boycott lasted until the Supreme Court of the United States told the community that its law was illegal. Rosa Parks changed her community and nation. So something that you should know about Rosa Parks is that she's not the first person to boycott giving up her seat because of the unfair laws at the time. It was an organization that all protested against different laws that were seen as not fair. And the way that they did it was that they challenged the laws. They made people realize that the law didn't make sense by going against them. And so that's what eventually led to the boycott, as well as her working with that organization. Let's continue to the next page. Before we continue to the next page, don't forget to write down some answers from the text that we just read about steps to solve the problem. So we read about Thomas Edison and Helen Keller and their disabilities. We read about how African Americans were enslaved and treated unequally with Harriet Tubman and Benjamin Banneker. We also talked about Rosa Parks and the laws that were created that treated African Americans unequally. And now the last thing that we're about to read is talking about natural disasters that cause destruction. So if you chose one of these topics, then we've already gone through the problems that they faced and what types of steps they took to fix the issues. So Thomas Edison, it talked about how him and Helen Keller worked to make sure that other people had the choice or had the help if they had disabilities. For Benjamin Banneker, we read about how he started advocating or asking for the government to realize that African Americans were people too. And then Harriet Tubman, she saw that there was a problem that people needed to escape slavery in the South, and so she did something about it. So what steps did she do? We just read about it. You can write that she helped people escape from slavery in the South using the Underground Railroad. And for Rosa Parks, she challenged the laws, the unfair laws, by working together with others to boycott and protest the laws that were in place. So all of these were steps that they took, and then the solutions would be how did different people solve their problems? So Thomas Edison and Helen Keller, what was the solution on the other page where it talked about how they wanted to help other people with disabilities have the chance to go to school and be treated equally? And for Rosa Parks, it talked about how once she was able to get attention, or once the groups were able to get attention and make people realize that the laws were unfair, how did they fix it? So that's what you're going to be writing for the solutions down here. Let's continue to the next page. So on the other page, we talked about how people affected their communities by seeing that there was a problem and then they wanted to fix it. And so that was what we were talking about on the other page, of how they solved the problems that they faced. But other things that can change communities are events. So something that happens in that community. And so we're going to be talking about it on here. And you can see from the title, events can change communities. Events can change communities as well. A natural disaster is one event that can impact a community. In 2017 to 2018, California experienced one of the largest wildfires in state history. The Thomas Fire burned 440 square miles. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. Let's see. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. The fires were followed by heavy rains and mudslides. Major roads were blocked, which made emergency response difficult. Homes and people were buried under rivers of mud. Other parts of the country faced hurricanes or tornadoes each year. There were more hurricanes and tornadoes than usual in 2017. That year, Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Marla ripped through the South Atlantic and Gulf states. Several Caribbean islands, Florida, Louisiana, and parts of Texas suffered damage. Disasters change the appearance of communities. They destroy buildings and landscapes. Researchers are helping communities change in ways that make them safer during natural disasters. In areas with flooding, community money builds and repairs levees. Levees are high banks that hold back floodwaters. Levees protect communities from flooding, but they change the appearance of the landscape. So you can see the image on the bottom and how much water is on the road to the point where it's past the tires and it's flooding the car entirely. And the caption says, flooding has impacted the people in this community. Now we're going to read about NASA. Did you know NASA's Earth Science Disasters Program uses satellites during disasters? Information from satellite images helps communities prepare, respond, and recover from disasters. Satellite images help track lava flows and hotspots in volcanoes. NASA also uses these images to measure rainfall and map flooding and mudslide. Drones and robots and other technologies are used during disasters. Both can go places where people cannot. Drones fly overhead and take pictures. They can locate people injured or lost in a disaster. They can help rescuers find paths and drop supplies if needed. They can also help response teams see damages and make decisions for rebuilding. Robots are used for disaster search and rescue. They can go into areas that are unsafe for people. They can carry cameras and sensors that send information to rescue teams. The passage of a law is another event that can impact a community. In the past, for example, disabled Americans have been treated unfairly. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 was passed to protect civil rights of people with disabilities. Thanks to this law, people with mental or physical issues cannot be fired from jobs simply because of their disabilities. So if you remember on the other page, we were talking about how Thomas Edison and Helen Keller were helping their community by making sure that they were allowing people with disabilities to be treated fairly and to have opportunities. This is the solution that they were looking for, which is that they now have laws in place that protect people from being fired or not having the chance to do something because of their disabilities, which is part of them. Now we're on the next page. Finding out about people and events. News sources are one way for you to learn about people and events in your community. News sources can tell about your community today or your community's past. Newspapers, websites, and television stations are just some of the ways people can get the news and connect with their communities. Many large cities have newspapers and websites that read across the country. Every day, newspapers publish articles about local, state, and national events. It helps keep people informed. Smaller communities also have newspapers, websites, and blogs. The newspapers may be printed about once a week. However, a newspaper's website may be updated more often. Local news sources are important because people need to know what's going on in their communities. You can stay involved with events even while traveling. And you've got an image of a laptop here with the caption, "Newspapers tell us what's going on in our community and in our nation." You may have noticed your parents watching the news, and this is how they stay up to date with what's going on around them. The national, state, and local governments have websites that give information about the types of services they provide. They also tell community members about events in which they give their ideas for improving the community. Blogs are another way you can learn about people and events in your community. Sometimes reporters for news organizations publish blogs on newspaper websites. Blogs may be updated daily or less often. A blog contains the reflections, opinions, and ideas of the writer. As a result, a blog may be biased. That means that it may present information which favors a particular point of view. Another way to find out about people and events in your community is through a historical society. A local historical society can tell how the community has changed and why. They can help connect people who are interested in the history of their communities. And you can see the image on the right where it has a caption of showing different newspaper stands. Newspaper vending machines line this street. So you can still see them around, but now people mainly have magazines inside there instead of newspapers, but you can still find them around. What do you think are some ways people and events change their communities? Now we're going to go back to our textbook or our practice book and answer the questions inside there. So now we're on page 164 and 165, and it's asking you to gather evidence and think about what you just read. So if you have the reading out in front of you, or if you have the text pages in front of you, you can use that as your resources. If you want to flip back to the other pages to answer this, you can do that too. But make sure that you are using information from the text, you're using neat handwriting, and you're going to be giving at least 5 sentences for an answer. 3 to 5 sentences for an answer. So let's find out what they're asking. Write and cite evidence. So you have to show where you're getting your evidence from, if it says cite. It says, write a letter to one of the people you've learned about in this lesson. Tell this person how he or she has impacted your community. So we read about Benjamin Banneker, we read about Thomas Edison and his inventions and his disability, as well as Helen Keller and how she wanted education for people with disabilities and the chances to do things. We read about Harriet Tubman and how she helped free people from slavery, as well as how she helped take care of people after slavery was over. And we also read about cell phones and how they affect us today and what type of benefits they did or they gave us. These are just some of the people that we were reading about, and you can choose any one of the people that we read about to write a letter to, where you're going to be telling them that you learned about them and what you learned about them and how they helped improve the community, which means the community of the United States. To ask and tell them what their actions did for us now. So if you chose Benjamin Banneker and how his actions helped people or helped African Americans now get different jobs, or if you wanted to talk about how Harriet Tubman helped free people and now no one in the United States is enslaved anymore. If you wanted to talk about Thomas Edison and his inventions and how he helped create sound devices, or if you want to talk about his invention of the light bulb, those are just some of the answers that you can put, but you need to explain why they are important and what they do for you now. So you need to have at least 3 to 5 sentences, full, complete, with punctuation, explaining what they did and how it affects you. How does it connect to you? Why is it important to you? Why does Benjamin Banneker's actions help you now, or help the community now? Why does Rosa Parks' actions affect the community now? Why does the actions of Thomas Edison and Harriet Tubman affect us now? And so you can talk about it for the whole of the United States based on the information we just read. Then we're going to be connecting to the essential question, which is, what people and events have changed your community? List 3 ideas. So we read about at least 3 to 4 people, maybe 5 even, and you're going to be listing which 3 you think were the most important, and you're going to be writing out who you think was the most important and why. So if you think that Benjamin Banneker did the most to help the community, you can write Benjamin Banneker because he helped he helped people understand that African Americans were people too. If you think that it was Thomas Edison and his invention of the light bulb, because now we can have light without having to use a candle or fire, then you can write him first. If you wanted it to be Helen Keller and you wanted to explain that she wanted equal rights for people with disabilities and the chances for them to do things, then you can write her first. Your job is to answer those 3 questions or fill in those 3 blanks with who you think are the most important from the people that we've read about and why. And I wanted to remind you that you guys have a project at the end of next lesson. So after lesson 5, you have a project talking about your community timeline and how it's changed over time. You were supposed to choose a community to research. You can choose your own town, your own country, or a state. You're talking about the history of that community. You're going to be talking about important events, so important things that happened that changed the growth of the community. Inside this lesson, inside the other lesson, we were talking about how transportation and shopping and all of those things affected the growth of the United States as a community. So if you were talking about the United States, you could talk about that. And then lastly, you were going to write a description of each event and place and tell why it helped the community grow. Then you were supposed to find images to use with each description. So make sure that if you are doing this project, that when you do it, you have to have images with it and explanation of the images. You can't just take a random picture and put it. You have to explain why that picture is connected to what you're talking about. And then you're going to be making a timeline. So the same way that you make a number line, you're going to be making a timeline of different pictures and explaining how things happen. So if it happened in the beginning, it's going to be on the left side of the timeline. And then you're going to put an arrow all the way to the right side of your paper where you can show what happened after that. And this is the end of lesson 4. So make sure that you have written all of your answers neatly, and we'll see you for lesson 5.